She saw the fire coming and walked straight into it. Cleopatra had all the ingredients to torch a career. A studio already wobbling, a script in flux, a shoot so sprawling it could swallow fortunes, and a romance that would scandalize half the world. Elizabeth Taylor still said yes. Why? Start with leverage. Fox dangled a record-shattering deal. $1 million up front and a piece of the profits, power no actress had ever held. Then came Richard Burton, whose arrival turned a grand epic into a public obsession. Even a near-fatal illness and an emergency throat surgery could not shake her resolve. Taylor understood the risk, reputational blowback, studio fury, headlines that would not let go. But beneath the diamonds was a strategist. She was playing for money, for love, and for something rarer, permanence. The real calculation is the story. By the late 1950s, 20th Century Fox was staggering. Television was eating into box office profits, lavish musicals had stopped pulling in crowds, and the studio desperately needed a spectacle that could restore its reputation. Executives landed on the idea of Cleopatra, an epic so grand it could eclipse everything else in theaters. But for that to work, they needed more than just costumes and sets. They needed a face that could sell the myth. Elizabeth Taylor was that face. At the time, she was not just a star. She was the star, known worldwide for her violet eyes, high-profile romances, and ability to command attention in any room she entered. She had already collected an Academy Award for Butterfield 8, survived multiple marriages, and cemented herself as Hollywood's most bankable celebrity. Fox knew attaching her name would guarantee publicity and lend prestige to the project. Taylor, however, had little interest in doing a sword and sandals epic. She thought the genre was bloated, old-fashioned, and beneath her. So when Fox came calling, she threw out a number she believed was absurd, $1 million, plus a share of the profits. To her surprise, they said yes. It was a staggering deal, the first time any actor had been promised a $1 million paycheck. And it was not just the base salary. Taylor's contract gave her 10% of the gross profits, plus daily allowances, a private villa during production, first-class travel, and perks that would swell her eventual earnings into the millions. Newspapers blared the figure across headlines. Overnight, she was branded the $1 million star, a title that made her both untouchable and a target. That record-breaking payday gave her unprecedented leverage. She could demand creative input, location changes, even delays if she felt the production was not ready. Few actresses in Hollywood history had ever commanded that kind of power, and Taylor knew exactly how to wield it. But it also raised expectations to impossible heights. Every dollar the studio spent, every setback the film endured, would be blamed on her. The moment she signed, Cleopatra stopped being just another historical epic and became the Elizabeth Taylor movie, its fate inseparable from hers. And Taylor understood the risk. Accepting the role meant carrying not just Cleopatra's crown, but the entire weight of Fox's survival on her shoulders. If the movie soared, she would be untouchable. If it collapsed, she would become the face of Hollywood excess. And soon, she would discover just how heavy that crown could be. Almost from the moment cameras rolled, Cleopatra seemed hexed. The first shoot began in London in 1960, with Taylor stepping onto colossal sets built at Pinewood Studios. But the English weather turned hostile, drowning the outdoor locations in fog and rain, while the production bled money before a single scene was finished. Then came the true crisis. In the middle of filming, Taylor collapsed with a near-fatal bout of pneumonia. She underwent an emergency tracheotomy, barely surviving, and spent weeks in the hospital. For the rest of her life, the faint scar on her throat was a reminder of how close Cleopatra came to claiming her off-screen as well. With Taylor incapacitated, Fox shut down the London production. The sets were abandoned, costumes discarded, and millions of dollars written off. It was one of the costliest false starts in Hollywood history. The studio had already spent an estimated $7 million before a usable frame was captured. Executives panicked, critics mocked the waste, and whispers grew that Cleopatra was cursed, destined to ruin everyone involved. When filming finally resumed, it was relocated to Rome, with an entirely new director, Joseph L. Mankiewicz, stepping in to salvage the project. Fox gambled that the Eternal City's sunshine and historic ruins would give the movie an authenticity London could not. But the shift only compounded the expense. Transporting cast and crew across continents, building new palaces and temples on the Cinecittà backlot, and restarting production from scratch sent the budget into freefall. What had started as a manageable epic was turning into a runaway disaster. Taylor, however, emerged from her brush with death more determined than ever. She now had the kind of leverage no producer could ignore. Without her, there was no movie. She knew it, Fox knew it, and the press knew it. Newspapers ran stories not just about Cleopatra's troubled production, but about Elizabeth Taylor's survival, turning her into both a tragic heroine and an expensive liability. Every setback now carried her name. The film was already spiraling out of control, but the real explosion was still ahead. It arrived in the form of a co-star, whose presence would transform a messy shoot into a worldwide scandal. When Richard Burton was cast as Mark Antony, Cleopatra shifted from a troubled production into a global spectacle. Burton was already a respected Shakespearean actor with a reputation for brilliance, excess, and charm. He was also married. Elizabeth Taylor, at that time, was married as well, to singer Eddie Fisher, whom she had already scandalized Hollywood by stealing from Debbie Reynolds just a few years earlier. Both Burton and Taylor carried reputations for passion and volatility, and when they collided on the Roman set, sparks flew instantly. What began as rehearsals quickly became an affair so visible the crew could not ignore it. Paparazzi lurked outside Cinecittà studios, capturing stolen kisses and late-night rendezvous. Tabloids seized on every photo, fueling headlines that turned the movie into background noise for the scandal. At one point, U.S. congressmen publicly denounced Taylor's behavior. Even the Vatican weighed in, publishing an editorial that accused her of erotic vagrancy. Rarely had a film star been so publicly condemned, and never had the condemnation been amplified so widely across the globe. For Fox, the scandal was disastrous publicity. The movie was already drowning in debt, and now its leading lady was at the center of what some called the most notorious affair of the century. Critics predicted audiences would boycott in disgust. Instead, the chaos only made Cleopatra more infamous. The affair became inseparable from the film, with people flocking to theaters less to watch the history of Egypt than to glimpse the chemistry that had set Rome and Hollywood ablaze. For Taylor, though, the affair was personal as much as professional. She knew the headlines were destroying her serious actress reputation, painting her as a reckless seductress, but she refused to abandon Burton or the movie. By then, the two were entangled both emotionally and publicly. To walk away would have been to admit defeat. To stay meant braving condemnation in exchange for love, leverage, and a chance to outlast the scandal. And fueling her resolve was another factor: money. For Elizabeth Taylor, Cleopatra was not only a romance or a reputation gamble, it was the most lucrative contract in Hollywood history. Elizabeth Taylor might have been battered by scandal, illness, and endless delays, but one fact kept her anchored to Cleopatra: the money. When she signed on in 1959, her contract was historic: $1 million guaranteed, plus 10% of the gross profits. It was the first time any actor had broken the $1 million mark, and the number alone made her a symbol of Hollywood excess. For context, top stars of the era earned a fraction of that. Taylor's deal was so big, it made headlines around the world, casting her as both trailblazer and target. But the fine print made it even richer. Because of delays, Taylor collected daily allowances and penalty fees each time production stalled. The longer Fox fumbled, the more money flowed into her account. By the time the movie finally premiered in 1963, her total payout had ballooned far beyond that initial $1 million. Contemporary estimates put her earnings at around $7 million, a staggering sum at the time, equivalent to more than $50 million today. Walking away was never really an option. Financially, the film was a goldmine for her, even as it drained Fox dry. Professionally, the deal gave her leverage no other actress had ever wielded. She was not just a star for hire, she was a partner in the film's profits, a precedent-setting power move that redefined how actors could be paid. Taylor herself later admitted that she had asked for the $1 million as a joke, convinced the studio would never agree. When they did, she realized she had negotiated herself into the most powerful position of her career. Of course, that power came at a price. Every headline about the ballooning budget tied back to her record salary. She was blamed for bankrupting Fox, vilified as greedy, and painted as the face of Hollywood's excess, even though much of the overspending came from executive mismanagement and production chaos. Still, money insulated her from the risk of walking away. Even as critics sharpened their knives, she knew she would walk out of Rome wealthier than any actress before her. And there was another benefit to staying: influence. The more Fox sank into debt, the more desperate they became to keep her happy, giving her a say in casting, rewrites, and production decisions. Taylor was not just Cleopatra on screen, she was Cleopatra behind the scenes, wielding power in ways that would have been unthinkable for an actress just a few years earlier. But while money gave her stability, it could not shield her from the narrative forming around her. To much of the world, Elizabeth Taylor was no longer a serious actress chasing great roles. She was Cleopatra herself, extravagant, scandalous, and dangerously powerful. Elizabeth Taylor's record-breaking contract did more than fatten her bank account. It gave her a voice in how Cleopatra was made. That kind of authority was rare for actresses in the early 1960s, but Fox had no choice. They had invested so much in her that keeping Taylor satisfied became essential to finishing the movie at all. She could push back on rewrites, insist on shooting locations, and demand accommodations most stars would never dream of. On set, she was not just the lead, she was the production's gravitational center. But with power came exposure. Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who inherited the directing job after the disastrous London shoot, walked into a project already spiraling. The script was unfinished, swelling to hundreds of pages, and daily rewrites were the norm. Taylor's presence, instead of calming the storm, made her the lightning rod. Whenever schedules slipped or tempers flared, headlines pointed at her. Each article about ballooning budgets, each whisper about endless reshoots, added to the idea that Elizabeth Taylor was personally responsible for the chaos. For Taylor, the calculation was brutal. She had wanted the biggest stage in Hollywood history, and now she had it. The sets in Rome were staggering. Temples, palaces, armies of extras, costumes dripping with gold and jewels. No actress before her had ever been filmed on such a scale. But all of that grandeur magnified the scrutiny. If Cleopatra succeeded, she would be immortal. If it failed, she would be remembered as the woman who sank a studio. She could feel her reputation bending under the weight. For years, she had fought to be taken seriously as an actress, winning praise for performances in A Place in the Sun and Butterfield 8, the latter even netting her an Academy Award. But Cleopatra threatened to undo all of that. Instead of Elizabeth Taylor, serious artist, the public began to see Elizabeth Taylor, diva on a gold throne, drowning in scandal and diamonds. And yet, she pressed forward. Because beneath the gossip was a shrewd understanding. Even bad publicity kept her name in headlines. The more people obsessed over her private life, the more they guaranteed they would buy tickets to see her on screen. It was a dangerous gamble, trading artistic credibility for sheer spectacle. But Taylor knew that the size of Cleopatra meant she could outlast the criticism if she simply survived the fire. But Fox was not so resilient. As Taylor wielded her influence, the studio itself was crumbling under the movie's weight. By the time Cleopatra limped toward completion, 20th Century Fox was bleeding money at a rate Hollywood had never seen. The budget, originally projected at around $2 million, had ballooned to more than $30 million. Some estimates push it closer to $44 million once interest and overhead were factored in. In today's dollars, that is well over $300 million, a staggering figure for a single film in the early 1960s. The fallout inside the studio was immediate. Executives were fired, careers ended, and panic spread across the Fox lot. The company's financial health was so dire that bankruptcy seemed likely. To raise quick cash, Fox did something that would change Los Angeles forever. They sold off hundreds of acres of their backlot. What once housed vast sets and open land was transformed into what is now Century City, a gleaming business district that exists because Cleopatra nearly destroyed its parent studio. In a sense, Elizabeth Taylor's epic was indirectly responsible for reshaping the very geography of Hollywood. For Taylor, this collapse was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, she had fulfilled her contract and walked away with a fortune. On the other, her name was forever tied to the movie that had almost bankrupted one of the biggest studios in the world. Every headline about Fox's desperation included her million-dollar salary. Fairly or not, she became the symbol of Hollywood extravagance, a star whose demands and scandals had pushed a company to the brink. The irony was that much of the chaos had little to do with her. Fox's poor planning, indecisive executives, and constant reshuffling of directors and writers drove the budget into the stratosphere. But the public did not see that. They saw Cleopatra's golden barge, the endless delays, the love affair dominating headlines, and the most expensive actress in history at the center of it all. To them, Elizabeth Taylor was Cleopatra, both on screen and off, demanding, dazzling, and dangerously expensive. And when the film finally premiered in 1963, all eyes were on whether it could possibly justify the cost. When Cleopatra premiered in 1963, the buildup was so enormous that the movie could hardly escape disappointment. After years of scandal, illness, and spiraling costs, the press treated the opening not just as an entertainment event, but as a verdict on Elizabeth Taylor herself. Could the world's most expensive movie redeem the world's most scandalous star? Financially, the picture was a paradox. Cleopatra was the highest-grossing film of 1963, raking in tens of millions worldwide. Audiences were drawn to its spectacle, 4-hour runtime, jaw-dropping sets, and the forbidden romance burning between Taylor and Richard Burton. But because the budget had ballooned to astronomical levels, even record-breaking box office receipts could not cover the costs. Fox still reported catastrophic losses, and the word flop stuck. To the public, the numbers did not matter. The studio had nearly collapsed, and Taylor's salary was the symbol everyone latched onto. Critically, the reaction was equally conflicted. Some praised Taylor's regal presence and her ability to command the screen, noting that no other actress could have embodied Cleopatra's mix of power and allure so completely. Others accused her of being miscast, too modern, too melodramatic, or simply overshadowed by the production's excess. Reviewers in Europe were particularly harsh, framing her as more celebrity than artist. What really stung, though, was how the scandal colored the film's reputation. Instead of being judged on performance alone, Taylor was judged as a public sinner who had flaunted her affair with Burton across the world stage. The Vatican's condemnation still echoed in headlines. For years, critics dismissed Cleopatra not only as bloated cinema, but as evidence that Taylor had traded artistry for extravagance and passion. And yet, even in the backlash, Taylor emerged more indelible than ever. Few actresses could have survived such bad press, but she did. She remained at the center of every conversation, and the Taylor-Burton pairing became a cultural obsession that eclipsed the movie itself. If her reputation as a serious actress had been scorched, her reputation as the most famous woman in the world was cemented. The gamble had nearly burned her, but Elizabeth Taylor had not crumbled. And that leads to the real reason she took the role in the first place: money, power, and a love affair that made her risk everything. So why did Elizabeth Taylor take a role she knew could destroy her? The truth is layered. On the surface, the million-dollar contract was irresistible. No star had ever wielded such leverage, and Taylor knew the payday and the precedent would secure her place in Hollywood history no matter how the film fared. Walking away was never realistic when the numbers were that staggering, but money was only part of it. Once Richard Burton entered the picture, Cleopatra was no longer just a movie. It was the crucible of their love affair. Taylor, swept up in the kind of passion that ignited tabloid headlines across the world, refused to abandon him or the role that bound them together. For her, finishing the film was as much about standing beside Burton as it was about honoring a contract. The affair may have scorched her reputation, but it also gave her a sense of vitality she refused to let go of. There was also pride and a deep sense of legacy. Taylor had been underestimated before, dismissed as just another glamorous face or a scandal magnet. By accepting Cleopatra, she claimed the largest canvas Hollywood had ever built for a woman. The sets, the costumes, the armies of extras, it was a throne no one else could occupy. She knew her reputation would take a beating, but she also understood that no one would ever again question her as a cultural force. She was Cleopatra, not just on screen, but in the way she commanded attention, money, and power. And in a way, she was right. The film nearly bankrupted Fox and torched her credibility in the short term, but Elizabeth Taylor emerged not as a casualty, but as the prototype for the modern superstar, paid like a mogul, judged like royalty, and unforgettable even in defeat. In later years, she would win more Oscars, headline more scandals, and outlast nearly every critic who predicted Cleopatra would be her end. The gamble that looked reckless became proof of her survival instinct. Elizabeth Taylor knew the fire was coming. She stepped into it anyway, and that is why, 6 decades later, we are still telling her story. If you enjoyed this look at the hidden truths behind Hollywood's most infamous epic, make sure to subscribe. More untold stories of legendary stars and the risks that define them are coming. And trust me, you will not want to miss the next one.